I don't know what your week has been like, but it seems like this week has been particularly crazy. I decided I was going to go running on Wednesday. I was trying to fit it in the schedule because the day was crazy. We had something coming up in the evening. I had a lot going on during the day, and I had that one moment where the weather was nice, or nice-ish, and I thought I could get in, I could go run, and I thought I could run for 3 miles, and I would have time to do it. And so I went out and I started to do the run, and I went about 100 yards, and I twisted an ankle. And that hurts, you know. I turned an ankle, and of course I've played sports, so I've done that a million times. And I could tell it was one of those times where you twist the ankle and it hurts really bad, but you know you probably are going to walk it off. You're probably going to be fine after you get past the first 2 minutes of just hurting a lot, you know, and then you can kind of walk it off. So I did. I just sort of stayed still. I waited for it to subside. I started to walk, and then I started to run again, and I was telling myself, I got to start watching where I'm putting my feet when I'm running on these crazy sidewalks. I got to start watching that sort of thing. And I'm coming up, and I'm at Oak Grove, and I've got Grand, that intersection coming up, and there's a whole lot more cars there than usual because there's a wreck that had just happened, and so there's a couple of beat up cars on the left. There's a bunch of people standing around. There's about 30 cars at the intersection, and there's a bicyclist coming right down the sidewalk right at me. And so I'm looking at all of these things going on, and tripped on the sidewalk and took a header right into the pavement there. And so today I was doing more of the raising hands during praise instead of the clapping, because this still hurts. You know, it's hard to clap right now. And so and then I'm skinned up. Both hands are hurting, and both hands are starting, you know, are trying to bleed. And I'm thinking, I don't think God wants me to run today. I just took it as a sign from God. I mean, when you're in pain, all of the enthusiasm goes away. And I just took it as a sign from God that today I'm just not going to run. So I just walked home and found a bunch of, you know, Band-Aids and medicine and put it all on. And I just wasn't going to do it. I was having that kind of a day. And I think sometimes, and I think especially right now, we have that kind of time going on in our country, sometimes in our families, sometimes with our job situations. It's just a little bit crazy. And this morning is a little bit tough, and we prayed for some people that are dealing with some tough times. But what better time there is there to just take a moment and take a breath and remember that in the beginning, God. There are times like that when we just need that breath. Where we just need that moment where we just remember that of all of the stuff that's going on in life and around us and all the things that we have to worry about, in the beginning, there's still God. In the beginning, He created everything. I love that picture that is up there of Jesus, and it has to do with Him creating. And so they've made every letter, you know, just some aspect of creation. And I think that's really cool. And there's moments when we just need to remember that He's still here. I distinctly remember wedging myself in the back windshield of the car when I was a kid. Back in those days, you could do crazy things like that. We even had these vehicles called station wagons. I don't know if you know about those, but station wagons had this. It's sort of like a covered, you know, bed in the back. It wasn't an actual bed; it's like a pickup bed. But you could get back there, and I guess they were meant for storage. But what we thought they were meant for was the kids to play around in while, you know, you're driving. And so no seat belts, nothing. You just get in the back, and Dad takes a corner. You slide across and slam your head against the window on that side. It's great fun. And I distinctly remember driving to Grandma's house in Success, Missouri, and wedging myself in the back windshield so I could look at the stars. Let me tell you, when I was a kid, I used to look up all the time. I mean, I was looking for aliens and UFOs too, but mostly I was checking out the stars. I had my favorite constellations, and I didn't even know they were constellations. But I just had my favorite little groupings of stars. There was a couple of them I knew were constellations, like the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper. But I was just always, as a kid, fascinated with looking up and seeing the beauty that God had created. And when you grow up in the country, you get some really nice views. You get to see the Milky Way because the sky gets so black. When you're camping out in the country, if you stare up into that black sky and you just wait for a few moments, it won't take long and you'll see a satellite going across. A tiny little, barely can see sort of dot that's just streaking across the sky. And every now and then, when things are right, you might even see the northern lights. Every couple of years, they just show up. And I wonder if in the midst of everything that's going on in our life this week and all the things that we have to worry about and all of the things, the craziness that our nation is going through, if that sometimes the best thing to do is to look up. I want to talk to us today about that because I wanted to go through a little bit of the book of Genesis and some other things in the days ahead and the weeks ahead. But when I look at Genesis, I'm reminded that we can look up. That in the beginning, there was God. And you need calm people in circumstances. You need people in an emergency who are just sort of focused and centered on the things that they need to be focused and centered on. You need people who can take charge of something where everybody else is panicking. You need those firemen. You need those policemen who will do their jobs when everybody else is taking cover. You need those people who will go into the burning building, who know how to deal with the situation while everybody else is running out. And the Bible says something about that as far as God's people are concerned. Here we are on this planet in the midst of everything everybody's going on, God's family, of all the places all over the world where God's got His people, that God put us here for a particular reason, to be helpful and to be encouraging and to be those folks that are centered on the right things in the midst of all the craziness. Jesus said it this way. He said, "You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt should lose its taste, how can it be made salty? It's no longer good for anything," He said, "but to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet." He said in the next verse, "You're the light of the world. A city situated on a hill cannot be hidden." He says in verse 15 that no one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket, but rather on a lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. He says in the same way, let your light shine before others. Jesus said that you and I and God's people are supposed to have a purpose, to be salt and to be light in the midst of the world. So no matter what's going on, no matter how crazy it gets, when everybody else might be in a panic, that if you know God, and you know in the beginning there was God, and you know in the end there's going to be God, that you can be salt and light on the earth and in your community and in your nation. Salt not only seasons things, but it also preserves. It disinfects, it gets rid of bad stuff. When you're light is helpful. It helps people see their way, but light is encouraging as well. When the sun comes up in the morning, there's just something about that just feels good. Light can do that. Light can be encouraging. Salt can be incredibly helpful. And Jesus says, you are salt and light on this earth. You might not be a fireman. You might not be a policeman. But on this earth, you know God. You know Jesus. You have hope. You know that it's going to be okay. We need to be the people. I think God's called us to be the people that remember to look up. That remember where our help really comes from. And when you look up, you can see the creation. And when you look up, you can see the beauty. When you look up, you can see the heavens that declare the glory of God. And when I say we need to be the people that look up, I mean that figuratively. I'm not asking you to walk around looking up all the time. You would run into poles and things like that, run into other people. You'd trip on sidewalks in front of 30 cars and a whole bunch of people standing over there at an accident so they can laugh at you. I kid you not, we checked out Facebook to see if anybody had a dash cam and had posted a picture of me taking a header into the sidewalk. We were just a little worried that I was going to get embarrassed that way, which I would have just thought was funny. But so I mean this figuratively. I mean to look up by remembering to look up at God. And I think we do that in certain ways when we do certain things. And one of them is this. I think we need to remember that in the beginning is God. Remember that. When we get into Genesis, we normally argue over evolution. We normally argue over how old the earth is. We normally argue over how best to interpret chapter 1. Was it talking about 6 or 7 days that were 24 hours each? Was it talking about 7 days that were a long period of time each? Was it just being poetic? We usually argue over those kinds of things. Do we take it super literally? Do we take it mostly literally? Do we take it poetically? How do we take that particular chapter? And there's going to be a day when we can get into that and we can talk about those kinds of things. But today, I just want to talk about remembering that in the beginning, God. That's where it all started. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And in verse 2, he says, "Now the earth was formless and empty, and darkness covered the surface of the watery depths. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters." And he goes on to say, "Then God said, 'Let there be light.' And there was. And off he went." Oh, he created all kinds of stuff. He did all kinds of things. And it's kind of funny here that he said, "Let there be light." You should probably know you can use this at home when people are saying interesting things and you want to be interesting. So you can bring this up. God in Genesis didn't actually create light. He didn't create light. He said, "Let there be light." Because, see, God is light. The Bible says in God there's no darkness at all. So if God said, "Let there be light," if he was creating it for the first time, well, he was already there. There would be light there. And in fact, in the New Testament, Paul quotes this verse. And when Paul quotes this verse, he quoted it like this in 2 Corinthians chapter 5. Paul says, "And God who said, 'Let light shine out of darkness.'" See, he didn't really create it for the first time. What he did was he put light into the darkness. And it had just said that the earth was covered by darkness, but God said, "Let there be light." So where there was darkness, God put light. And he still does that sort of thing. He'll come into your life and he'll put light where there's darkness. Where you're struggling, where sin has got you weighed down, where addictions have got you trapped, where life has just come all apart, or maybe when you just realize when you stand before a holy God that we're just completely unworthy, we're not good enough, and yet of all of the problems and all of the failures and all of the sin, that in the midst of my darkness, in the midst of your darkness, God says, "Let there be light." Oh, that's an amazing thing. But God keeps doing that in the world, and he keeps doing that through his people because, you see, he put you here to be salt and light in the world. He continually puts light into darkness so that you see people in God's family all over the world just giving themselves to others, whether it's feeding the hungry, whether it's taking care of those who are suffering, whether it's building a hospital or an orphanage. God always continues to put light in the darkness. He does it to us personally, but then he does it with his people all over the world. It's an amazing thing. They've estimated, though, the chances of all of this stuff, the earth, the heavens, life, of just coming into being by accident. Maybe this is just, the world looks at verses like this in Genesis and says, well, that's really not how it happened. It just came into being by accident. It came into being through just natural processes. But we're the people that are saying, no, wait, God did it. In the beginning, God, we're the people that are remembering that. We were people that are remembering it was God who said, let there be light. And the reason why there are things that are here is because of God. But sometimes when we wonder about that, we should remember these kinds of things. They've estimated how many atoms are in the universe. You'll hear from time to time people say, well, there must be lots of life on other planets because just look at how many planets there are. And there are, I don't know how many trillions, there are a zillion planets out there. But they've actually estimated how many atoms are out there. I mean, atoms are like, there's billions of them in your body. So how many atoms there are in the universe would be a lot. That would count all the planets and everything, way more than the planets. And they've estimated that it's 10 to the 80th power. That's a 1 with 80 zeros after it. That's that number. That's how many atoms are in the universe. That's a lot. That's a big number. I'm not sure. It's billion, but I don't know how many that would be. That's a lot. But they've also estimated the chances of one particular protein, just one, because proteins are the building blocks of life. If life is just going to show up all by itself, then somewhere along the line, a protein had to just come together by itself and then start from there. And so they've estimated the random chances of a protein coming together by accident, just doing it sort of randomly, came together and it worked. And they've estimated that. And that is 10 to the 195th power. That's a number that's this big. Well, oops, I got a little off there. Maybe, there we go. There's the end of it. That's the chances to form one protein. So this over here is this is the number of atoms that are in the universe. Here's the chances of just getting one protein. That's 195 zeros. It's an incredibly big number. It's like no wonder we haven't seen a whole lot of aliens coming to visit. I'm all for that. I'm kind of hoping that God created aliens, to tell you the truth, because I think that would be super cool. And I'm looking forward to meeting a few of them, to tell you the truth. And I think I've actually already met a couple. They're in my family. But seriously, just the chance of it happening without God. That's the thing. Without God, where did it all come from? And even when you run the math, it seems to indicate that God was there. Fred Hoyle calculated the chances to get life. Not just one protein. Mathematician by the name of Fred Hoyle calculated what are the chances for life to come together. And he came up with the number 10 to the 40,000th power. That would be... that looks like a lot, except that you'll need 74 more of those pages. It's a huge number. But a biophysicist who was also an atheist, Harold Morowitz, he calculated the chances of one bacteria coming together, one of the simplest forms of life, one bacteria, and he came up with a number that was 10 to the 10 billionth power. That's that number plus 18,621,974 more pages of zeros. And if you think that's kind of crazy, the Journal of Astrobiology a couple of years ago, just about 2 years ago, wrote an article called "The Timing of Evolutionary Transitions Suggests that Intelligent Life is Rare." So what they came up with, they had 4 scientists that did the study. They researched the odds and the time that would be required for evolution to just show up like it is today to produce all of the things that we have today for ourselves. And the math didn't add up. They said that the expected evolutionary transition times likely exceed the lifetime of Earth, perhaps by many orders of magnitude. In other words, they looked at the same kind of math and they said, we shouldn't be here. If that was going to happen by accident, we shouldn't be here yet. Maybe that's why we haven't run into many aliens. Maybe we're the lucky ones. We're going to invade them. That's what's going to happen. But he said we shouldn't be here. It should have taken a lot longer than this for us to be here. But that's because in the beginning, God. If God, then you're not just on your own. If it's in the beginning, God, then you're not by yourself. And it's not hopeless. And your life matters. And it can be okay, because in the beginning, God, you're not alone. We need to remember that some days. We need to remember that with all of the things that have gone on, there are always moments when we see things work out and things happen, or just something around us that reminds us that He's here. And you're not on your own. I think from time to time we need to just remember that He's in the room. Another thing that we need to notice again is the glories of God. That's kind of a churchy way to put it. But sometimes that just means looking up and seeing what He's done already, and seeing what He's accomplished already, and seeing what He's made already. I'm going to camp this week, and I'm doing a sermon this week, and one of the sermons is about Mary, Jesus' mom, and about when she was going to be pregnant with Jesus, and an angel came to tell her, you're going to be pregnant with the Son of God, and so, these messages we're doing at camp they're kind of around Christmas, and so hopefully I don't have to bring a gift or anything, but we're going to camp and we're doing these kind of Christmas messages, and there's this moment when Gabriel, this angel, comes up to Mary to tell her that she's going to have the Son of God, and she's just kind of taken aback by everything. And in the process of telling her, the angel says, and look at your relative, Elizabeth. Because Elizabeth was way past time to have children, and yet she was going to have a child. He was going to be John the Baptist. He was going to prepare the way for Jesus. God was doing this whole thing. You can read about it in the book of Luke, 1st chapter. And the angel says, look at what God's doing with Elizabeth, your relative. And it was encouraging to her, because it wasn't just what she was hearing for herself, but she could also just look around and notice what God was doing elsewhere. And there are moments when we want to remember that in the beginning God, but there's other moments when we need to look around, when we need to notice again the things that God has already done, and just remember and realize that He's doing things in people's lives. He's doing things in church. He's transforming people. He's created all this awesome stuff. He's done it before. He didn't just disappear. He's still here. Look around and see the creation. Look around and see the hand of God. Be encouraged by that. There are moments when we need to look up at God. And sometimes we do that by looking around, because He's already at work around us. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 9, it says, and then God said, let the water under the sky be gathered into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. Verse 10, God called the dry land earth, and the gathering of the water He called seas. And God saw that it was good. In verse 11, it says, then God said, let the earth produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants and fruit trees on the earth, bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kinds. And it was so. Verse 12, and the earth produced vegetation, seed-bearing plants according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. That's just day 3. There's a whole bunch of days in there. But God is forming stuff. He's moving stuff around. It's kind of neat when you step back and you look at chapter 1. Because in chapter 1, God will create a space, and then He'll fill it. And then He'll create a space, and then He'll fill it. So He created the earth. He had brought the land up and separated the land from the water. So He's got all this room. Now He fills it. And He fills it with vegetation. And He fills it with fruit and plants and everything that's on the earth. And then on day 4, He had already created the heavens. On day 4, He starts filling the sky. He starts filling the sky. He's going to put the sun and the moon in their place. He's going to put the stars in their place. He's going to fill the sky that He's created. In this chapter, God's going to create a space, and then He fills it, and He does it over and over. It's pretty awesome. I just want to point out that nobody ever looks at a sunset and throws up. They don't. Unless they were sick already with the flu or something. But nobody ever looks at a sunset and goes, gross. Nobody does that. Nobody looks at a mountain range covered with snow and says, that's horrible. I saw on the internet, every now and then you'll see some beautiful scenery on the internet. I saw on the internet, I don't remember where it was at, but there was this body of water and it was really, really shallow. And I don't remember why. And I think it's just temporary every now and then, but it's really shallow. And so you could just get out there and walk in it. And it goes out for a long ways. And at the sunset, it looks like a mirror to the sky. And you can't really tell where the sky starts and the ground starts because the water is just so reflective. And they were taking pictures of that and they were getting out there on it. And it would look like that somebody was walking on the sky. And nobody who saw that video said, that's disgusting. Nobody did. Now you can't get people to agree on what is pretty, beautiful music. You can't get them to agree on that. Or what is just, well, that's just noise. You can't get people to agree with that kind of stuff. But everybody agrees on the sunsets. Everybody agrees on the snow-covered mountains. Everybody agrees when they look at the creation and they see the beauty that God has made, or they look up and they see the stars in the Milky Way. Everyone sees the beauty and appreciates it. And let me tell you, it did not help you in evolution. It does not help you to stay alive just because you think a sunset is pretty. So why do you think it's pretty? Why would we all share that same appreciation? Because I think we notice the glories of God. Because we were created in His image. And we recognize where His hand has been. Just like you can tell when God's hand is working in your life, you just know that wouldn't have happened without God. Or I just feel like God's telling me. Or you see how God takes something that's bad and He turns it into something good. And you think and you feel that that's God's hand in that. I think we notice God when we look around for Him. I think we see what He's done. I think we can tell when He's brought us through some difficult times. And I think we can look around and be encouraged. And when we look up, sometimes that means just look around. It means remembering that God created everything, but it also means just look around. And I think it means one more thing, and that's this. Looking up means also just getting busy. Get to work. Get to it. The work of God. There's a thing in Genesis chapter 1 that we talk about a lot, and it's called the Imago Dei. I think that's how you say it. If I don't, if that's not how you say it, you can use the video of this sermon and make fun of me all you want. It's fine. But I look at it and I go, it's the Imago Dei, and it just means in the image of God. You're in the image of God, because that's what it says in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, God says, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. They will rule the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, and the livestock, the whole earth, and the creatures that crawl on the earth." He says, so God created man in His own image. He created him in the image of God. He created them male and female, both of them in the image of God. Verse 28, God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it. Rule the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, and every creature that crawls along the ground." And I just want to point out, when He says to subdue the earth, He means to take control of it. When He says to rule the fish of the sea, that word means to take control of and dominate. He wanted humanity to be in charge of everything He had made. He made humanity in His image and gave them the job of taking care of creation. In other words, God, when He put light in the darkness and made everything, that also included making human beings to be that light, to be that person created in the image of God, to be that force for good on the planet, to be salt and light. See, you don't have to be perfect. Jesus is working on you. He's working in your life. You're a work in progress. But even though you're a work in progress, God's light still shines through you. That God still has created you to do good works, to be a good person, to share God's light with other people, to encourage somebody else, to love a neighbor, to whatever's going on in the world, to be that one person who brings goodness and kindness and patience and shines the light of God in the midst of a world that sometimes gets pretty dark. And one of the ways that we look up is that we remember. One of the ways that we look up is that we look around. And one of the ways that in our hearts we look up is we remember the job that God gave us to do, and we get to work. And we're light and salt on the earth, created in God's image. Let that be the space that you rest in some days when it's all crazy. Let that be the moment, that be the area where you live in that, where you can breathe, where no matter what's going on, that we remember God, that we can look around and see God, and we know that He's created you and I for a reason, for a purpose, and we can follow Him.